from 9 trillion. And from your perspective, at least where you sit, you don't see the hullabaloo around that.
No. I think those who listen to His Excellency on the Madaraka Day, he made it very clear how places like Singapore and the so-called Asian Tigers developed. They developed by using other people's money. Nobody will give you money unless they think you have the capacity or the ability to pay. In Kenya, everybody is queuing to lend Kenya money. We have never reneged on any, whether it's the Eurobond, whether it's the World Bank, IMF facilities. Kenya has always been on top. Kenya is the only country in the region which has never had to go begging to be able to repay their debts. Of course, everybody has had to ask for rescheduling in terms of the COVID dynamics, where the economies were down, production was down, imports, the global sea lanes, everything was down. So the economic activity, the revenue base was down. So you're getting to a situation where people are renegotiating and asking for rescheduling of the debt. But Kenya, everybody wants to lend them money because of their ability to pay. Not to say that some of the borrowing has been very prudent, because we know there was cheaper money available, and these guys sometimes went for some very expensive money. Chinese money, for instance,
yes,
on the surface looks very cheap. But when you look at the details inside the Sinosure and all the attendant costs that go with that facility, it's sometimes fairly expensive money. And that's why people prefer to do World Bank and IMF.
So you're saying even the IMF to date has no concern about the borrowing rate and the conditions that have been set. Are you saying that?
IMF has given our Treasury a clean bill of health.
Really? Even
Yes.
with the requirement to give the sunset dates for fuel subsidies? Which
Yes.
it hasn't given the exact dates. That's a Treasury.
Actually, the subsidies have been the cause of some of our problems, because this is the only government in the region that has been subsidizing the consumer. Now, what happens in terms of those subsidies is that the gap between the landed cost of petrol and the price of the consumer is actually paid by the government. So the government, instead of spending money on healthcare, instead of spending money on food security, instead of spending money on other social programs, is finding itself in a catch-22, where it is actually subsidizing the motorist. And remember, Kenyans are like, it's okay to have expensive petrol than not to have petrol, because people keep moving, because that is the engine of moving the economy.
Is that what Kenyans are saying? It's okay to have expensive?
I'm telling you, they'd rather have expensive power than no power, electricity, for example. And that is why you had the IPPs, the independent power producers. The manufacturers were saying, we'd rather have expensive power than have no power at all. Because if then you do not have power, everything grinds to a halt. It's the same case.
But at what cost? That's the question. But back to the IMF, and there are concerns. There's a report that the International Monetary Fund Executive Board is set to delay its approval to disperse 28.7 billion shillings loan disbursement to Kenya. And it is said that while the country had hoped to get the board's nod to wire the funds, which are part of a 3-year loan program, before June 30th, the IMF Executive Board calendar to the end of the month does not include discussions on the third tranche disbursement with Kenya. That spells like concerns from the IMF.
When you deal with IMF, you have to be very careful, because you remember when they brought structural adjustment programs to this country, they really hurt third world economies, and they want you to be beholden to them, so that they are like the headmaster telling you you can only do X, you cannot do it. So when you have a government that says, no. In fact, one of the reasons why Kibaki succeeded was to trash that IMF protocol and go direct to friendly partners like China, who would then come. If you remember, we were having the EU, the IMF, the World Bank, And all their programs and projects had conditionalities. And the Chinese came along and they said, stop telling us about conditions and corruption and those things. We want to give you money to do the infrastructure to help you to take off.
Question is, at what cost?